Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello, hello.
What time of year is it, Jeffrey?
It's Halloween, David.
And this is episode 306.
For those of you who are not sick of our Halloween antics, welcome to the show.
We almost forgot.
Yeah, it's true. We didn't really think about it, even though Dave brought over these lovely Halloween decorations. Well, for us, they're Halloween decorations. You all might have them out all year long. I don't know. Yeah, very nice Halloween jack-o'-lantern there, though on the video it just turns out like a silvery blob.
That's because it's the ghost of a Halloween jack-o'-lantern.
Wow. And thank you for bringing this one.
It was my mother's.
Really spruced up the broadcast foxhole. Oh, it was Mom's, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm honored to have it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're not doing any decorations this year, but we go to the store and we walk up and down the aisles and enjoy the decorations there.
That
Which has been
works.
fun. Go to Menards, go to Home Depot.
And your neighbors.
Neighbors do it. Yep.
You got that skeleton guy over here, the horse and everything.
Oh, something, it must have happened a couple of years ago. Some company, some manufacturing company in some other country probably, I won't speculate where, decided to do a whole factory where they said, the guy probably came in with an idea. I got an idea. We're going to do the whole factory that just makes skeletons.
Really?
Well, and they started cranking out skeletons because over the last couple of years, skeletons are everywhere.
Oh, and all kinds.
All kinds. Dogs, armadillos, people, elephants.
Armadillos,
sure. You go around the neighborhoods now and you used to see one skeleton or bad skeletons, and now there's just armies of skeletons dancing in people's front yards. And
they're more inexpensive.
It must be.
The guy down our street has a guy throwing a ball and two dog skeletons down there.
Catching the ball?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really something. So, and a little scary. Some people's houses are a little too creepy.
The gore.
Would you agree?
The gore we don't need.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to see the Jeffrey Dahmer house, for instance. Not necessary.
No.
So, but yeah, here it comes. And it's getting cool here in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah, almost snowed this morning, but not quite.
That was scary. I almost had to get out my boots.
Windy.
Yeah.
Cold wind from Valhalla.
Yeah. And which is, it's not too bad. We'll only have, let's see, we'll have October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. Okay, only 8 months of really bad weather here in Chicago. No. And then there's 4 months when you don't want to kill yourself anymore.
No, it's just half of January, February, some of March.
Yeah. It's no fun being out in November, December, January, February, March, April, May. Okay, 7.
No, it's great being out in December.
Is it?
Yes, playing in the snow, Christmas, sledding. Okay. Christmas, New Year's.
You're going to have to call and cheer me up.
You're sitting around inside with your warm drink and enjoying the snow out the window. And then
the fact your heater's not working.
And then it gets to be a drag. February.
Yeah. So what's new with you, Dave?
Well, I just wanted to share show and tell.
Oh, what do you got? Oh.
So
prehistoric
Jeff knows.
Animals. Yeah.
I love these prehistoric mammals, and I saw this on eBay. And I thought, it's one of those DK books. They're huge. All these pictures, so cool. Only $5. I hit buy, and then it arrived.
Yeah, it looks fantastic.
It is.
How many pages?
For 12
pages. Look at the writing. Oh my gosh.
Megatherium, though.
A Megatherium. The writing is big enough a Megatherium could read it.
I love it. I wanted the picture.
Yeah.
Paraceotherium.
That's not even a real thing.
Yes, it is.
Oh, come on.
Yes, they are.
No.
Yeah.
What's
the
that?
Propaleotherium.
Oh, somebody's pulling your leg.
No.
Those aren't even real dinosaurs.
Jeff, this is why the prehistoric era is so cool. But I really thought the book would be more. Okay, it's 23 pages, but.
Oh, 23. That is hilarious.
So it's like, it's not a DK book.
Yeah.
50 pages,
Yeah.
lots of info, and the cool art. But anyway, so, and I had a model of the woolly rhino we talked about before on the air, and I said when I brought it to school, the kids were looking at it, and they were like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "You know what that is? No, it's a woolly mammoth. I mean, a woolly rhino." And they're like, "What does that? What?" They had no idea.
Really?
Like, how do you not know a woolly rhino? I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to donate it to charity.
So how long did it take you to read it?
Yeah, I haven't yet.
3 minutes.
Yeah, it will. Yeah.
That's pretty funny. I was looking for an old movie the other day because I get nostalgic and I like to see the old movies that I used to watch as a kid. And one of them was The Lost World, which came out in around 1960 or something like that with Claude Rains? Possibly? I can't remember. Who? Anyway, I was reading about the movie and they said that it was a kind of a big production. I think Irwin Allen did it. And he originally wanted to do animatronic dinosaurs because there's at least one big dinosaur fight scene. And they were cutting back for some reason. I think that the studio was struggling because they had just finished Cleopatra. This is the story I heard, so it's probably not true. But they just finished filming Cleopatra, which was the huge, Richard Burton,
Cecil B. DeMille,
Elizabeth Taylor, not the Cecil B. DeMille one, but anyway, so they ran out of money, so they had to dress up lizards. They put on the extra fins on lizards and do the lizard fight scene and miniature fight scene instead of the stop action stuff, which saved them a ton of money. But it also ended up making it look like it's two lizards fighting in it.
And when you're saying animatronics, you mean animation?
Animation. Yeah, I don't mean anime. I mean the like the Harryhausen stop motion stuff.
The King Kong movie in '85 was supposed to have this. It's got giant animatronic Kong, and I think all it was a hand, and then it looked so stupid.
It did, yeah.
Should have animated it, but
yeah.
Well,
yeah. So maybe Dave, if you get the mood to make a movie, because you used to make movies and I used to make movies, we could get a couple of lizards, or we could do just cutouts from your book. Just cut them out, and we'll work on that.
We will.
Yeah, but first, we got a show.
We do have a show for you.
And we've got a special guest who we are looking forward to talking to. So put on your comfortable shoes.
Your woolly mammoth costume.
Your woolly mammoth costume, yep. Get out your popcorn balls. Did we talk about popcorn balls? No, not the best treat. The best treat when we used to go trick-or-treating, my favorite was a popcorn ball. And they're not easy to find. I had to go to Walmart. And you kind of have to go early in the year because they sell out or they just don't get that many. So I bought 4 bags of 12. So I got 4 dozen popcorn balls. I love them. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
I gave you one.
I'm glad you brought them over for our chariot game.
Yeah, but you're not clamoring to get more?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I feel bad.
Well, let's give Hayes a call.
All right, let's call Hayes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Two Half Squads.
I'm Dave.
I'm Jeff, and we have a special guest with us tonight, Hayes. Say hello.
Hello, Hayes Wauford here.
All the way from somewhere else in the world. He's not here in the broadcast foxhole with us, which is why it's so roomy. And we have our Halloween decorations there. So welcome, Hayes. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
It's always good to have a new voice in the broadcast foxhole. So, and it's Halloween, getting to be Halloween up here. Is it getting to be Halloween there? Way down south?
It is. We're a couple weeks away. Yes, I'm in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and we're looking forward to it. We have 9 and 5-year-old boys, so it's a big big day around our house.
Yes, fantastic. And will they be dressed up like the 2 half squads this year?
No, I could promote that idea. They're going to be a secret agent, the 9-year-old, and the 5-year-old will be a mummy.
Good.
God, that actually sounds fantastic. I had 2 girls, so every year it was a princess or Britney Spears, and boy, I mean, they're great, but never could get them to dress up like Marines or anything good like that. Secret agent is very cool.
We do a lot of military play. I'll have to share that year before last, they went as Kelly and Oddball from Kelly's Heroes.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. One of my favorite movies. They've fallen into that. So.
Yeah, we have discussed that film on this show a couple times over the years. My son has suddenly out of nowhere gotten into this animatronics, and he's been buying 2 or 3 of these real fancy ones. And they have a convention where people go to see the newest releases for the year, and he met a guy who does the designing of them. It's a big deal. It's become a whole thing, you know. And my wife was like, when did Adam get into this? And I said, I don't know why he likes it. And then she says, well, your basement's full of Frankenstein model kits and the Wolfman, and you had played D&D with them. And
well, the boys are just the right age. Are you starting to get them into wargaming?
They are interested in wargaming. We'll play some simpler games. They've done the Memoir 44. We've got the old World War I airplane game, which I'm blanking on the name of it now, but Dogfight, yes, where you have a squadron at each of the 4 corners of the board, and really great, really simple but elegant mechanics. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they know a little bit about ASL. The older one, the 9-year-old, could probably step you through the turn sequence, at least the main phases. So
it's wonderful.
It's fun.
Got to get them started early.
That's right.
And then how did you get into the gaming thing, Hayes?
So I started kind of in the miniature gaming hobby. My dad had a model railroad set. So that was kind of my first interest in small models and building things when I was 4 or 5 years old. And then I remember when I was 9 or 10, I bought War Games Illustrated. I think it was issue 89 at a Hungates, back when we had a Hungates here in town. And it was a miniature war game magazine published in England, monthly publication, pre-internet and all that, and just loved it. I mean, I've still got the copy. It's worn out. And then from there, thankfully, I found a brick and mortar store in Statesville, North Carolina. So it's about an hour from us. Great store, kind of the quintessential game store up above a used bookstore. You go up this narrow staircase and, you'd go upstairs, and it kind of had that musty hobby store smell to it. And that fella had both miniature figures as well as ASL and some of the Gamer Series games and other board games. So I sort of fell into them about the same time and have always done it more or less concurrently. I don't know that there's ever been a phase where I've been more heavily or only involved in miniature gaming versus board games. I've kind of continued playing both.
And you can't play by yourself, so how have you found players all through that time?
Right. So thankfully on the miniature side, there's a nice club down in the Research Triangle, which is about an hour and a half from us. So Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. They have an annual miniatures convention, and really great group of folks, probably 60 to 80 pretty active members down there. So for the miniatures gaming, that's been a great outlet. Here in our town, which is smaller, we're about 200,000. They're just a handful of miniatures gamers. And then I've kind of historically had 1 or 2 ASL players in the area. So that's been good. I don't do a lot of Vassal. I definitely prefer face-to-face. So it's been nice. And they're actually, there's a pretty good group of guys around. It's just hard for me with the kids to get a game scheduled. So Derek Ritter of Ritter Krieg is 20 minutes down the road. So when I buy stuff from him, I can physically go to his store, which is kind of cool to walk upstairs and check out all his product. So he has a tournament every year that probably has a dozen guys come into town, and then there's also the Bitter Ender tournament in Raleigh, which is it's the only ASL tournament I've ever been to, but I think a pretty good one. It's certainly not like ASLOC or one of the big ones, but they probably have 50 players.
Oh, that's excellent.
From around the East Coast. He gets guys driving in from 4 to 8 hours away.
Yeah, what time of year is that usually held?
It's in the spring. I want to say it's about April. And I think they missed a year or two with COVID, but it's restarted. And I've enjoyed that. I've done it twice. I wouldn't say that I'm heavily involved in the competitive side of ASL, but I enjoy the ability to play, 4 to 6 games over the course of a weekend and know you're going to have an opponent. And I find that I can enjoy it more if I don't take it too seriously and I'm not too worried about the winning, but just getting scenarios complete and having fun with my opponents. So.
You play how many games in a week then?
At the tournament, we would, I think I've done like 6.
Okay.
Like 2.
My brain would get too tired.
I found the first time I went, I was very tired and I didn't really have the stamina for it. But the second time I went, again, I tried to take it a little less seriously, not worry about every move and every turn and just, know that I was going to make mistakes. And that was more fun.
Mm-hmm. And then during your regular month at home or with Derek, how often do you think you play?
It's waxed and waned a lot. I mean, again, with kids. So I've had periods where I was probably playing twice a month since the oldest was born, and then I'll go 3 or 4 months and not play.
Yeah.
But I've gotten through some fun campaigns. A friend of mine, Kevin, here in town, he and I have done maybe 3 or 4 campaign games. Suicide Creek being my favorite. I really liked that.
Oh,
yeah. Good one.
Yeah, Jeff and I did all those scenarios. Not the campaign, but
it was fun building the I forget the rules terminology, but when you had to make the fords across the creek with the bulldozers and all that, that was really cool. And the corduroy roads, it just brought a lot of new stuff in.
Yeah.
So what came first when you were getting started? Was your obviously your dad had some influence because he had the model railroad, but how about the historical component? Are you as interested in the history? We actually know some ASL players that don't really care that much about the history. They like the mechanics of the game. That's what really has drawn them in. But are you a history buff as well?
Huge history buff. I would say my love of history probably came first. Reading and watching, documentaries, old war movies. I mean, I grew up on the Longest Day and Bridge on the River Kwai and, those. So that was, I'd say history came first. And then I have a love of modeling. And so I really enjoy painting the miniatures and making the terrain and painting the buildings. And I don't love plastic models, but I enjoy painting resin and metal models, that kind of thing. And so I would say that came before the love of the game, but then ASL just fit well into that because I love all the different aspects of, particularly, I mean, World War II has always been my primary military history interest, although I love all other periods. But it just, it worked really well. So I'd say the game sort of came second, but close second.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine was reversed, I think. Well, no, I always played Army and stuff as a kid and had the Airfix miniatures, but didn't study the war and really get into the learning about it until I had ASL. That really sprung me to that end. But we have Hayes on today because he has done some amazing work in the miniatures. So, I have my own. So that doesn't have the turret. So what I did with mine, Hayes, was that's the Japanese, right? And I did the labels on the bottom with the stats.
Love it.
So I built up a bunch of those, and then I did the stands. So that's the red striped. I just put red marker around the label. And my problem was when I did it this way, I had to make everything individually, right? So they have squads label. And I saw another guy at a tournament who had removable labels, so he didn't have to paint such a complement of things, right? What else here?
Those are 15s, Dave?
These are 15s, yeah.
Mhm.
So like I did the light machine gun. Well, that's not a light. That's the heavy with the stats on the bottom again and
Mhm.
individual to attach to a squad. And
Mhm.
the sniper cut out little octagon.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then you would send us an email saying you would started listening and threw in some shots, which I was just amazed with.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, they're great.
And I will say, I mean, I've learned a lot through the process that I would do differently. But now that I've got hundreds and maybe thousands of miniatures, it's hard to go back. But I use 20 millimeter War Games figures, which would be equivalent to 1/72nd model scale. And it's a scale that's been very popular in England for years and years, especially for World War II. But it sort of came out of, like you said, the Airfix generations of plastic models and all that. So I do similar to what you've got, Dave. Here, 3 20 millimeter figures on a round base. I did the round just because I liked the look of it. And, really, since facing for the squads doesn't matter, I just felt like that was kind of good. I don't have a label on the bottom of this one, but now one thing I've done on the labels is I do like you have, Dave, where it has the unit stats, but then I'll go ahead and put below that the half squad stats. And so during a convention game, when I'm running it, I'll just cross out the top line with a pencil if they either deploy or if they're reduced to a half squad. I'll just cross that line out. And that way I'm not having to do extra stands. When I first started into it, I was doing 3 and 2 figure stands. And I realized that it was just fiddly. And at a convention game, I'll typically have 3 or 4 players per side versus just 1v1. So it makes it a lot faster than trying to swap out labels or do anything like that. And another, we can get into how I sort of utilize the rules for convention games. But one aspect of that I leave out is ELR, just because, again, I mean, I love ELR in the rules, but for a miniatures convention game, it's just hard to keep track of. And when you have lots of different fire attacks going on, people just either remember if they break or they don't. They don't keep up with how badly they broke. And it's, again, one less stat to have to keep on the counter. So that's one change to the rules. But otherwise, similar. I've got individual figures for leaders and heroes, and these are all Russian guys. And then the vehicles. I do the vehicles typically on a square stand and face them like the counter would be. So here's a Stuke,
Nice.
and it's faced toward the corner, so you can actually line it up in the hex. And then here's a Mark IV. Nice thing about this, one thing I love about the miniatures game is you can actually turn the turret. So you don't have a turret counter. You just turn the turret. So there's some benefits of the miniatures. In general, it's a lot of work for maybe getting less of the actual rules out, but I just love the look of it. So then same thing. I've got crews, Dave. I haven't gotten down to the level you have. I like what you've done with the individually mounted machine guns and all. I've got some mortars and heavy weapons. I forgot
that's actually for when you drop a weapon.
Okay.
So I do have crude stands also.
Very cool. Yeah, so most of mine are like that. I mean, here's a Russian, heavy or medium Maxim with the guys on the stand. So typically I just model that with them. A lot of times they're already cast like that. So I don't really change out. And then if they leave a weapon or have to route away from a weapon or whatever, I'll put the physical board game counter out there. I try to not use the actual cardboard counters unless I just haven't made a model representation of it, just because I prefer the look of a miniatures game, when I'm doing a miniatures game. And so for the pin and break and the various markers that I use a lot, what I've done there is I've photocopied the counter and then put it on a little bit larger wood base, and then I've actually terrained around it. So when you put it down, it looks pretty nice. For the not, I don't know if y'all want to get in the weeds with the rules, but modeling wise with the broken guys, what I'll usually do on that is when they're just broken, I'll put a casualty figure by them with a little yellow ring just so it's easy to spot. And then when they're DM, I'll throw the additional DM marker on there. But just the casualty figure would represent broken.
Yeah, that's a good way to do that for sure. I think we were just turning them around as broken, facing away.
So I think the 15s, I mean, this was something I wanted to talk about just for folks that have an interest in pursuing this. I think the 15 millimeter figures, especially if you're going to use the 4-inch hexes, are ideal. So GHQ makes 4-inch foam hexes that you can buy by the pack. They're just a white styrofoam, but they're pre-cut. They're, you know, really crisp edges and all. And so you can paint and terrain those however you'd like. One word of warning: you don't want to use spray paint on foam. You know, anybody that's done much modeling or wargaming, you learn pretty fast that some of the propellants in the spray paint will eat foam, but testers spray paints are fine. And then any just brush on paint is fine. But you don't want to use a cheap rattle can spray paint because it'll actually start eating the foam. But yeah, so I think the 15 millimeter, if I was going to tell people how to really get into the ASL and miniature, I think 15 millimeter figures are the way to go because of the way the buildings sit really well within the hexes. So one thing that I don't love about my games from a game standpoint is the buildings oftentimes kind of creep outside a hex. So it doesn't provide the same line of sight that playing on geomorphic or, you know, historical ASL boards provides. You have to get a little more creative. So if I wasn't acting as the referee and you really had, you know, two guys who were wanting to do it somewhat competitively, it'd be kind of messy.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of HO buildings scale, right? Fits with the 15s pretty good.
Yeah, so that does work out well. But yeah, again, I mean, my thought with the miniatures, I love the way it looks. I love the way the ASL rules work versus a lot of historical miniature rules are good and provide a, you know, 3 to 4 hour game that you can finish and come to a completion. But like every time I try to play a game with some of the truly just historical miniature rules, I feel like something's lacking. You know, it's like, where's the rate of fire? Where's the fire lane? Or you know, I just had a great roll in a rally check. Why can't I create a hero or, you know, go berserk or something? Just all that fun chrome that ASL adds that very few miniature sets, I think, have captured. And a lot try to capture it. And without saying it, they're basically trying to do what ASL's doing. They want to make it simpler and easier to pick up on, but hard to have both.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I do have a set of 20 millimeters. I had sold off a bunch of my 15s to a Flames of War person and thought I got tired of having two different scales. And so I used my 20s for another set of rules. Oh, we haven't played it in years. I can't even think of it now. But so I do have some of the larger tanks and things too. So I will still play that as a skirmish game, but do love the ASL. So the only thing I have left is the Japanese and then the Americans and the Marines. So I can do all Pacific.
Right.
But yeah. But you have lots of terrain stuff. I also had the hexes from my friend made them, and he was moving, and he just said, "Dave, will you give me like $100 for these?" I'm like, "Yeah, I will." So I still have all those boxed, and for a while stored in my wife's closet up high, and she's like, "You don't use these very often." I know, but between all the other games, you know. But you're getting me fired up to want to break all this out again and get some games going.
That's awesome.
I don't run them. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Hayes.
No, I hope it inspires you to get them back out. That's great.
Oh yeah. But I don't run them at tournaments. Do you find you can have inexperienced players sign up and have a good time learning?
I do. So what I've done when I've run it, so I've taken it to miniatures conventions, Historicon being one of the big ones up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, that the Historical Miniatures Gaming Society or HMGS runs. I've taken it there a few times. I've done it in Raleigh for that group a number of times. And what I do is myself and sometimes a second person who's helped me put the games together, have acted as sort of umpires or GMs. And so almost all the fire attacks and everything, we just figure. I mean, we're not asking the guys to know every modifier and, be able to add up all their firepower. I mean, they get to where they can do that after a couple turns. But basically, the decisions are, where do you want to move, via what route, and you explain to the guys how deadly it is moving through the open, and they don't listen, and then they lose a squad on their first move, and they're like, "Oh, that didn't happen in a miniatures game." It's like, well, 12 down 2 attack or whatever you just took is painful. But we try to figure a lot of that ourselves, and especially when you have armor. A lot of times we'll just kind of not make up the modifiers, but if you've got a long shot, highly unlikely shot, I'll just have the player roll, and if it's not going to be close, I'll just tell them they miss, or if it is close. I mean, the nice thing about being the GM, it gives you a little bit of that omnipotence to where, at the end of the day, if you just tell them they miss, they're not going to argue. And I'll use 95% of the modifiers, but if I forget one each turn, it's not the end of the world. It's kind of what I found, because the games are big enough, and the players don't have the mindset of a competitive tournament player. They're wanting to, play the game out to a conclusion and see what happens with the rules. And I think the fire phase and the movement phase really excites people, the ability to interrupt and first fire and subsequent fire and have multiple fire phases, and the defensive fire phase is something that a lot of miniatures gamers are not used to and really enjoy. So yeah, I think we've had pretty good luck. I mean, I would say there have only been a handful of people out of the hundreds maybe that have played over the years that have said, "Oh, that was too complicated." I mean, I think most people say I enjoyed it, and maybe they played ASL or played Squad Leader years ago, and it sort of interests them in breaking it back out, that kind of thing. So we've had really good feedback from it.
Yeah, I've run the Avalon Hill Circus Maximus chariots in miniature, and I find people, if they come to my house to play, no experience, you just gotta trust me when I go. You can break, evade, or take the attack, and then roll this low, roll high. And if they just kind of roll with that, they get right into it. But if they stop and go, well, what's this and this and that, too analytical, it's going to slow things way down. So they got to kind of have some trust in you as the game master. And I'll recommend too, I wouldn't go that fast in the curve with your chariot.
That's right.
Unless it's an emergency and you have to catch up, and then just roll low. So you want to walk us through some pictures of
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to.
The terrain.
Let's see. So I'm going to share the screen again. So this is a Stalingrad game that we put together, and here's an example too. So you can see the 4-inch hexes, all with different terrain. I mean, we've got kind of snowy ones. We've got the road going through there, off in the distance by that little common area fountain. You've got some cobblestone ones. We've done different things. So I would set all those out. They're all individual bases, individual hexes, so you're completely modular. And this I loosely based on Guards counterattack as far as the forces and general layout of the buildings. But again, I've seen people who do the ASL in miniature that have made just beautiful representations of like board 1 and board 2. Mine's used a little more artistic license, I guess you'd say, and I want the look to be right. I want it to look like a really good miniatures game, just based around hexes. And then I throw the rubble out there with the various urban games. These are all resin buildings that I've painted. 3D printing has gotten huge in the war game world, of course, and so a lot of them are now 3D printed in resin, or the various filaments and things they use. Those paint up well. So yeah, Stalingrad game. I think I've got one more of that here, close up. So you can see here's some Russian troops. Again, mostly squads with 3 figures on the base. The information would be on the bottom. And I kind of like, for a miniatures game, how that gives some fog of war too. Just because if they've got a support weapon, as long as the opposing player, I mean, it's easy to forget when you've got 15, 20 squads aside who has what. So it gives a little bit of natural fog of war just by putting the counters on the bottom is what I found. But I think having them visible on the top is great too.
And I see shell holes. Are those individuals that can be placed separate from the hex?
Yes. Yep. They sure are. And so I would add those and could even add those during play if there was a bombardment or something, just for fun and give a good look and spread the rubble around. We've got telephone poles and fences and pretty much all the odds and ends that you would see in an urban setting. I'm working on a Berlin game right now, which I'm really excited about. Just started talking to some friends in Raleigh about that. So we're going to potentially do the area around the Reichstag and the bridges and all that. So
Hayes, you mentioned taking some artistic license for some of your setups. So and I can feel all across the world ASL players going, oh no, so what exactly does that mean as far as the ASL play?
So I guess I'd say with the general map setup, because again, you can see how the buildings, just the way they're constructed, they don't conform perfectly to the hexes. So, like this little building in the foreground here with a couple Russian squads around it, it may or may not fit perfectly in a 4-inch hex, but I would just call it a 1 hex building. And so therefore with line of sight, as long as you were tracing down, a hex side, even if it maybe clipped the wall, I would tell the player that it was a clear shot. Or I'll fall back to more of like a true line of sight, like you do in a miniatures game, like with a laser or something like that, and just go from hex center to hex center and let it fall where it may. But that's where it gets a little bit tricky. And when I've had big ASL tournament players over to play, I've had to kind of preface going in, this is going to be a little bit different. We're not going to argue lines of sight. It's going to be a little more natural, just because the models, at least in the 20 millimeter scale, don't lend themselves to that. I think the line of sight is the big thing. And then just the actual board setup, just because, again, if I go back to that first photo here, there's not a board that looks exactly like this, but there are boards where you have 2 buildings and across the street 2 more buildings with 3 or 4 behind. So again, what I would do is I'll look at a scenario to base the miniature scenario around, and then I'll sort of tailor it to what I physically have and what, the buildings will allow. So, tanks are a great example. I don't have a model of every possible German AFV. So a scenario might have a particular 251, and if I don't have that model, I just don't have the model. Now I may give the 251/1 the ability, if it actually should have a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun or whatever, I may tell the players, well, this is mounted with a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun. But just, the array of counters you have in Squad Leader, you would spend a fortune trying to replicate in miniature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So here's one. This is an older one. You may recognize it. This is Gavutu Tanambogo.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So the what was that when it first came out? Blood and Sand, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Wow. Something like that when it came out in the magazine. So we did this prior to it being re-released, and so I remember this project fondly. I took the map, that was one of those maps you had to cut out and put all together. So I did all that. And then I went to Kinko's and I had it, giant sized, however big I could get it, to have something to kind of start piddling with and working with. And then this was a situation where I actually cut all this out of blue board. So these are not the GHQ hexes. These are big sheets of blue board that I cut the hex pattern in with a hot knife.
Wow.
And you can see the slightly larger joints, which I don't love how those look, but that's where the actual boards come together, so you could get it into a manageable size to put in the back of a car and take to a convention. But you've got the landing craft. So this actually, if you look at the map, this is a exact recreation of the map. As far as the size of the islands, the hex arrangement, everything, it's all dead on. The things that I didn't model, and I'm going to go back actually here in the next few months and add, are I think there was a dock or two that I didn't model, and a couple things like that. But otherwise, it's as it is. So here, a thing I had to do to make it more miniatures friendly was I had to go ahead and cut the caves into the hillsides. So as the player, you can't decide where you want the cave. It's more, as the game master, it just made sense to put them where they are, and that way you have a model recreation of it that the players can see versus putting a cave counter out there.
Yeah, but you don't have actual hexes then going up the mountains?
I do. Let's see. I think I have maybe a closer. Yeah, here's a closer shot.
People listening to the podcast, I'll put several of these pictures up on the website, but you can always click over to the YouTube for this one.
So here is, and I forget now which one's Gavutu and which one's Tanambogo. I think this is Tanambogo. You can see it much better in real life, but you can almost make out the hex grid going up the hillside there. You can see it on the beach, and that same hex grid does continue all the way up the hill. One thing I had to learn there was dealing with the steep inclines.
Yeah.
Is when you put a hex, it's hard to describe, but when you put a hex grid over a 45-degree angle, it skews the length of the hex.
Mm-hmm.
So that took some doing to kind of get that laid out just right. Something you don't think about when you're playing on the board. Here's another close up. So here's some Japanese pillboxes. The Marines have landed. Looks like they've taken over a pillbox and got some Japanese in the trench behind there.
Wow.
Yeah, so PTO, I really enjoy PTO. Here's some more recent ones. This is a late war. I based it on a Hurtgen Forest scenario. I forget which third-party publisher, but I grabbed it from one of the scenario packs. And here's one you can see I did on the fly. I had a friend coming over, and so I hadn't gotten all the bases labeled, and so I just stuck the actual ASL counters up on top of the base, and that worked out fine. I mean, it doesn't look quite as good, but it made it easy and saved me an hour of sticking labels on the bottom that I hadn't gotten to yet. Let's see. Yeah, here's another one. It's a little rubble building. You got some AFVs in the back with the Shermans.
Oh, I have that building too.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's an old Hubbles model. You can see the yellow rings around the figures I've got there to show that they're broken. You can see a DM counter behind the American squad over there on the bottom left. You can see the roof off the building at the very bottom with the German squad in there. So that's one nice thing about miniatures. Most of the buildings in 20 millimeter, the roofs will come off, the floors will come out. So you can physically put the figures on the level that they're on, which is fun. Let's see here, a couple more. Here's a Normandy game that I did last summer at a game store. So you've got some wheat fields, some hedgerows. You can see a puma's gotten destroyed there in the foreground. Another puma's coming up behind it. And I love again just the visual representation there. I mean, you can clearly see that straight road, and if you put a machine gun at the end of it in that orchard, you could have a great fire lane there. I mean, I don't know. I just like the visual representation of it.
Oh yeah,
I think it's really
cool.
Really cool.
And you have is that grain and then brush back there?
Yeah, it's actually two different ways of how I made the wheat fields, and I was sort of in I was in flux on how I was doing it. The one closer to us is doormat that I cut up.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the one further on is teddy bear fur, which I've gotten better at using that since I made those hexes. But you can buy it at Joann's or Michael's, by the yard, and then you shave it down, cut it down, and paint it. So I use that a lot for
Mine are the teddy bear fur, and then I just made the doormat finally after 30 years of wargaming. I just cut it into squares and rectangles, but not for the ASL, just for the other miniature games.
So what other miniature games or periods do you play?
I got all the Civil War, and we were doing a lot of Fire and Fury.
Mm-hmm.
And then the American Civil War, Rev War, with Washington's Wars. It's quite an old set of rules, but works very well. And then for our beer and pretzels games, Desperado in the Old West, which I did one, which was a zombie one that I saw someone else do at a convention.
Mhm.
That was a lot of fun. And what else? Oh, the Vikings game where it's silly. They come on and they just search and try to attack each other and take things, and they're finding in these little buildings and all this stuff. So some of them are very light, and then a little more heavy.
Mhm.
I got the Ancients of All Types for Might of Arms is where I left off. We just started playing that again last month. I got 13,000 15mm miniatures.
Wow.
Yeah, so their boxes, Jeff can tell you, the boxes like this has 346 minis in it. And then I have the Romans, and all of them are like 300, right? So Romans, the Celts, the Assyrians, Egyptians. I started with all that, then went into Civil War, and then American Rev. And I ran games at school for kids too in a club for
Nice.
several years. Yeah, it's nice. Simple ones.
So were you doing the miniatures or board games first?
Really, it was, well, let's see, D&D first, and then I got into Squad Leader. This guy just said, we're going to buy this most difficult game, and you can handle it. I said, no, I can't. And it hooks you,
Mhm.
right? ASL. And he walked me through everything, and also war games at his house. He had friends run the 15mm Romans and someone, and that hooked me too. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this ASL, and it stayed at that for a long time. And then the Chariot game, Gladiators, just kind of branched out a bit over all the years.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. I've got one more brought up here. Yeah, so just another shot of that same Normandy game with some hedgerows and wheat and 251s and little stumps in the background. I like to add little things like that. I've got furniture for the rubbled buildings, different little add-ons which make it nice.
I'm using that as a not a hedgerow.
In this particular scenario, that was actually bocage.
Okay.
Yeah. Just depending. And again, I don't utilize, I mean, not to upset the ASL aficionados listening here, but with the bocage, a lot of times I'll just have the additional plus modifier. I mean, I'm not going to get into every single bocage rule just because the guys who are playing in a 6-player game, they've never seen the rules. They're not going to know the difference, and
they don't need to.
the goal would be to get to a good, fun outcome, and have fun things happen. You want a lot of firing and squads breaking and tanks blowing up, and you don't want to get too in the minutia if you can help it.
No, you don't.
So do you have something special, a way to mark a hex or a AFE or something if it's on a blaze?
Yes. Yep. I sure do. I've got the various, smoke and fire that I'll put out. And that we've actually had smoke spread if there's wind, and, we'll use smoke grenades. And I do try to use a lot of that just because, again, that's the chrome that I love. I mean, they're not, offhand, I can't think of a miniature set of rules that really does a good job of representing smoke grenades and just the way they work within the movement phase and protecting you and all that. It's pretty special. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, it sure is wonderful, and looks like we should start wrapping up here. Do you have anything else, Hayes, you'd like to add?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to come on. I love the show, and it's great to have an ASL podcast,
Oh, well, good. We've enjoyed doing it mostly over the years, right, Jeff?
Yeah, most of the time. Especially the opportunity to meet people like you, Hayes, who are doing something a little different with the hobby and expanding the hobby. I can imagine that at least some of the people that are not familiar with the ASL rules are intrigued by it after playing one of your games and maybe hopefully get into it. Plus,
I
you're
hope
turning
so.
out kids. You're turning out kids that'll play, which is terrific.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the visual piece of it, will draw people in to
Yeah.
look. If I'm doing it at a hobby shop or a convention, it'll bring people in, and then you never know where they'll take it with the rules, but at least they know they're available and something they might want to get into. I've got into a D&D group more recently, about 5 years ago, and I got a lot of those buddies over to play, and none of them have stuck with it yet, but they know it's available and they know it's out there, and different other miniatures gamers that I've kind of helped. At least they bought Beyond Valor, and they're giving it a shot. So
Yeah.
Good.
And so you'll alternate kind of either playing with the miniatures and the big hexes or the boards themselves. Just
I would say I
depending.
play the board game more just because of the ease of setup.
Yeah. Okay.
I probably do a miniatures game 5 or 6 times a year at the most.
Special. It's a special occasion.
Yeah,
Just,
it takes a lot to get out, but boy, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
Yeah. Thank y'all. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
All right, well, should we
Thanks very
sign
much.
off, guys?
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us, Hayes. We'll hope to hear more from you, and I'd like to see pictures of the secret agent and the who was the other one going to be?
The Mummy.
Ah, the mummy. Yes, yeah. Send us some
They'll
pictures.
love to know that they got discussed on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, should we say remember to roll low,
And rally well,
but not when you're playing us.
Yeah, that would not be
Oh.
good.
All right, bye everybody. Bye,
Bye,
Hayes.
everybody. Bye,
Good night.
Hayes. Take care.
Bye-bye.